So, welcome to the Roost News Podcast, the place for all things volunteer. I'm Kurt Springstead, and I'll be your host today. In this episode, we're going to be talking about with representatives of AARP North Dakota, Washington, and here in New Jersey about their Speakers Bureau programs. Now, each state has taken a bit of a different approach to delivering information relevant to the 50 plus members of their community they serve, and each has been at it for different durations. So, we're going to discuss why they have these programs, how they're administered, and what outcomes they've seen from their efforts. And to help us tell the story today, I'm joined by a cast of thousands, as you can see here. I got James DeMata, the Assistant State Director in Washington, and Kay Tomlinson is a volunteer. She's a member of the Washington Executive Council and the Washington Speakers Bureau lead. And then we're joined by Daryl Quick, who's a volunteer and self-prescribed tech guru for the team. And then in North Dakota, we have Doreen Stryle as Assistant State Director, and she's joined by her volunteer colleague, Barb Handy Marcello. And then here in New Jersey, I have Fabiana Lopiccolo Stewart. She's the State and Community Engagement Analyst. And then I'm going to break the rules today a little bit because I'm a member of the Speakers Bureau here in New Jersey, and I just stepped down as co-chair for a while. So we'll break the wall a little bit today. So let's start off with just sort of with how all three states came to have speakers bureaus. What sparked the idea to start one of these speakers bureaus in your state? Who was the champion of that effort? Were there any goals or expectations of the program? So I think we'll start on the West Coast to go. So how did Washington get started with their particular program?
Well, thanks, Kurt. I can speak to that. Back in the day, former Washington staff member and then a volunteer, Gene Matheson, actually helped start the first Fraud Watch Hotline volunteer group in our Seattle office. And that group of volunteers also began contacting local organizations about speaking with a focus specifically at that time on fraud. And through the years, the Speakers Bureau has grown through multiple iterations with a variety of topics, all the way to our automated features and expanded volunteer support. That's really our current focus. And, when it gets right down to it, our focus hasn't really changed. Continuous improvement in our presentations and processes to better support our volunteers and, of course, the communities that we serve here in Washington State.
Very good. Yes. Lots of grassroots startups. So we'll move back towards the east a little bit. So I think, Doreen, you were in North Dakota. What was the history of your program?
Yes, Kurt. And much like Washington, we started out too with a fraud fighter group. And that was our folks that went out and strictly talked about fraud and scam topics. But then we officially started our Speakers Bureau in 2019. Right before COVID. So about the time we got all these people trained in September of 2019, we just really didn't have places for them to go for a while there. So we did some online training too along the way during COVID, and we made ourselves available for virtual presentations and did some of that at the time. And we started with about 20 people, and big thanks to New Jersey and especially Christina Wally, who helped us a lot. She brought a lot of good education to our group and still joins us for our training sessions. In fact, she's going to be joining us in April when we do another training. So so it's been really fun, and we just keep growing every year, and I'm really enjoying it, and it's just a highlight of my job.
Very good. Thank you. Actually, I recall as part of that training group, I got to first meet you and the colleagues out there in North Dakota. So now, Fabiana, the program predates both you and I on there, and so it took a little bit of digging to come up with a history. What did you uncover?
Yeah, definitely had to do some digging since it started about 30 years ago, our program in New Jersey, and it was originally actually a staff-led initiative. However, as volunteers became more engaged, they voiced a desire to help shape the content themselves. And so around that time in 2025, Mary Beth Dixon joined the AARP New Jersey staff team, and she took over the program. And under Mary Beth's leadership, the program made a really major pivot to a volunteer-led model. And this was empowering volunteers to create presentations based on their experiences in the community, with all of the content then being reviewed and approved by the state office before being delivered. A volunteer steering committee was also established at this point to guide the team's direction and strategy, ultimately forming what is believed to be AARP's first fully volunteer-run program.
It was quite an interesting bit of history. So thanks for digging that up. We're gonna have to lock that away for the rest of the membership. So now we should talk a little bit about the structure and the operations of the various groups. For a host of reasons, whether it's geography, the number, the skills of volunteers, each state has to kind of create a model that works for their audience and for what the resources they have. So sort of curious, what does the workflow look like in your individual states, whether it's finding the host organizations, the responding to requests, and even the follow-up. So I think we're going to start with Barb in North Dakota. You have a little control over that, right?
Yes, I'm part of the State Speakers Bureau, and I have a title. It's called State Coordinator, but I also share those duties with Doreen quite a bit, and with a new coordinator in Fargo, Cheryl Thompson. We have a nice electronic system that anybody can access to request a Speakers Bureau program. And so we get a lot of requests through that. We get a lot of requests just by people calling up the AARP office and asking for a Speakers Bureau, and some come in by email. Most of those will somehow filter down to my desk, and I will generally, if it comes in cold, if it's not somebody we've worked with before, I'll contact that host again and make sure that we understand exactly what they want, who their audience is, make sure that they aren't working from an old brochure that might have some programs in it that we don't use anymore. Make sure we have all the information we need, and then I'll contact a speaker and make sure that person is available on the day and time and can do the topic that's requested. And then I will introduce the speaker and the host and let them take it from there. And that usually works pretty well. Occasionally we have a little bit of a mix up somewhere, and then either Doreen or I will step in to fix it. But usually the speakers and the hosts take care of everything on their own. I try to set up a program about a month in advance. If we go too far in advance, I don't like to ask a speaker to take on a commitment 6 months in advance, and some of our requests come in that early. I like to make sure that their calendar is clear, and when they say they can make a date, that it's not going to change. And but sometimes we get requests. Can we have somebody next week? And that's a bit of a scramble, but we've been able to take care of almost everything that's come across. In part because our speakers, our volunteers are all very committed to the program.
Yeah, that's great. I do have my own experience with, can you come by tomorrow to fill in? Or what are you doing in December?
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting thing, yes. Difficult to do. So I know we have similar things. Fabiana, what's the story in New Jersey? How do we manage things there?
Yeah, so agreed that our workflow does sound pretty similar to what Barb described. Everything really starts with our Speakers Bureau website and our streamlined Microsoft Forms request system. So hosts can easily browse our topic catalog and submit a request, sharing with us all of the necessary details like their preferred dates, topics, and audience details. Once a request comes in, we also have a coordinator lead who responds usually within 24 hours using our email automation process. And so that email just confirms all of the details with the host before the opportunity gets sent out to our pool of 50 volunteer speakers. And after a speaker accepts, we connect the host directly to the volunteer. And from that point, the volunteer manages that relationship, the final logistics, and the presentation itself. And then behind the scenes, we are keeping track of everything. So from the number of events hosted to popular topics, repeat hosts, and volunteer activity. And this just helps us to refine our outreach, improve our workflows, and maintain consistency across our presentations.
Yeah, we're with us banging out over 400 a year. That's getting to be quite a project. Yes, thank you. So what about Washington? Anything that stands out or is different to how we do things there?
Actually, there's a lot of similarities. Over the past year, we've been gradually automating more of our processes. In June, we created a Google Sheet that we post online that allows the volunteers to go in, see the opportunities that are out there and sign up for them. And we use that to coordinate their activities. Last month, we introduced an interactive form that allows requesters to fill out and submit a speaker request over the phone, over the web. And in fact, kudos to New Jersey. We actually interacted with some of the folks there and used their Microsoft forms as a starting point for that. So thanks. The submission of the form then generates a email to James and Kay, and it has all the relevant details that we've collected from the form. So it also adds a row into a spreadsheet that's accessible to the folks. And depending upon the responses to certain questions, some of these requests may be directed to actual staff, James and Heidi, before they go out. But the rest of them also go through a little bit of a vetting process. And if the requests are deemed good to go by all the people in the process, we move them into the Google Sheet and make them available for the volunteers to sign up for.
Very good. Yeah, so we're all getting more tech than the people would think us AARP folks are capable of, right? I'm very proud of that. Good. So just curious, there must be some tools or practices that are really like must have to go along. I think let's go North Dakota this time. What's the secret weapon out there? Yes, Doreen.
Well, I just want to say Barb is my secret weapon.
Okay.
Our state coordinator. And she doesn't want me to say that, but I tell you what, she has just been a godsend to us at the state office as well, and very instrumental in our growth and success. So couldn't do it without her. But having that teammate or teammates to work on everything, the communication part of it, just is so helpful. And helping with training is also, really important too. So another important role that Barb fills. So, and then I love spreadsheets. So we have like lots of tracking that we do. And we have the MS form that comes to us as well. Both Barb and I get copies of that when they come through. So for tracking and reporting, we put our heads together and we both have our own systems in terms of how we track things and book things. And one thing I will note, I heard both of you say that you send out to all of your volunteers the opportunities. And we have a smaller group as well. So we typically ask people individually. We've been finding that that's more effective than sending it out to a bunch of them, because then they all think somebody else is going to do it. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, we've found more luck with just reaching out to individuals that we think match up well with the particular groups. So Barb has done a fantastic job in doing that. And now, as she said, we have someone else that's helping us, Cheryl Thompson in Fargo, filling the role in Fargo. We're in the Bismarck area. So anyway, so it's been great. And then one thing we like to do in terms of how all of this works and things that we can't live without, we try to also reward our volunteers and make sure that they look legit and credible when they go out into an audience. So they get jackets that have AARP North Dakota on them, and Barb's wearing hers, and she's wearing her name tag, which we also give them, a magnetic name tag that again makes them feel like part of our team, I think. So
yeah, that is handy. Now they kind of get you in the mood, but when you show up, you don't have to look for the host because they spot you right away when you get in the room. So it makes you find the person in charge very easy. Great, thank you very much. So I think you mentioned a little bit already, Fabiana, some of the things we're doing in New Jersey, but maybe you could just talk about the tools there.
Yeah, so there are a few tools and practices that are really essential for keeping our program running at the scale that it does. So first is our Speakers Bureau website and the online request form, which I already mentioned previously. And so it might sound really simple, but this self-serve experience really helps us to manage the volume of requests we receive. A second tool is our promotional ecosystem. So things like our Facebook video campaign, targeted email marketing, and consistent outreach to libraries and other past hosts is something that we consider very important to our success. And lastly is our volunteer-led structure, which is a tool within itself. The fact that we have a coordinator lead, marketing lead, training lead, content lead, recruitment lead, this really allows us to run like a small but very mighty operation. And together they form our volunteer leadership team. And we meet monthly to stay aligned and continue to innovate together.
Very good, thanks. So I think we got Washington. What's going out there?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, one of the things we've been doing is incrementally making changes and enhancements to our systems to support the process and to take some of the workload off of our staff and volunteers for the things that they shouldn't necessarily need to do by hand. One of the things that we've got going is, I mentioned earlier, the Google Sheet system that James created that's being used currently, and it's a good solution. But there's room for improvement. One thing that, as you had alluded to, Kurt, some of the folks are not real technical and they aren't as familiar with working with spreadsheets, especially in collaborative online method. So my development team is working on a web application to make that an easier interface for them that will actually allow the volunteers to use their web browser or their phone or their tablet to look up opportunities, sign up for them, cancel if they need to, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the key things about that, besides better security and better user interface, is we're adding notifications, tailored, customized notifications to let them know you signed up for this as a reminder or you've canceled this one, and to let other folks know so that they can fill the gap.
Okay, very good. So one last question in this general area. So, there's like 20 or more topics that are produced by the do-it-yourself team. I'm just curious, do you folks offer them all? We've heard a little bit of peeks at this, and are there topics from other sources that perhaps you present? For example, I'll say in New Jersey, we do all the DIY programs, and then about 2 years ago, we started offering technology-related programs that come from the Older Adults Technology Services Program, or OATS, or sometimes it's also called Senior Planet. It's another aspect of AARP. And these things address technology like AI and the use of technology for personal independence, access to resources, and so on. We did this because we'd had some organizations we'd been to so many times. We'd been through the whole menu, as we call it, of the DIY programs, and they said, "We love you guys. Can you come back?" And we wanted to maintain those relationships, so we got qualified to deliver the OATS program so that we could have another 20 or 30 offerings to set up. I don't know if we have similar challenges or desires. So, I mean, what's the story in Washington? I think, Kay, you have some insight about that, right?
Yeah, you bet. Well, we start with the DIY programs, and then we customize with information for Washington State, whether that's from the FTC organization, to make sure we have Washington numbers. But we have several retired computer engineers. Daryl's here with us, cybersecurity experts, teachers, and medical experts. We're really fortunate among our volunteer base. So we have the luxury of their input as well, which has been really helpful for us as we customize those DIY programs for our audiences. Right now, we're offering general fraud, protect yourself from fraud and identity theft, vigilance against cybercrime, AI 101 and fraud, brain health. Those are actually our most popular programs. And then downsizing, caregiving, and fall prevention as well, that we put together with a local organization that has been, we're really looking at expanding that. We're getting a lot of interest in that.
Those sound great. Thank you. So North Dakota is a little newer program. What's the menu look like if I ask for a program there?
The fraud topics are definitely our most requested, and we offer 4 different ones in that area, including the new vigilance against cyber crime. So those are always top of mind for people, especially trends and frauds and scams. They really like that one. We've renamed some of them ourselves just to brighten things up a little bit. Downsizing and decluttering is awesome. People love that one. And we've got a couple speakers that I in mind, one in Bismarck and one in Fargo, that have just been knocking it out of the park with that one and doing some fabulous things as they all do. But we're getting some requests too for smartphone, getting to know your smartphone, and the 6 pillars of brain health. That one was just done yesterday in the neighborhood here. And then also we have added those 2 new Social Security DIYs, the Understanding Social Security and the Social Security We Earned It. So those have been used out there and are getting some traction, and which we really like. We don't get as much call for the Home Fit program. And we did rename that one a Home Fit for Aging because somebody thought it was about like a fitness gym in your home at one point. And so we have given that one a new name as well. And then the new caregiving one, the caregiving for family, friends, and loved ones is also being offered. But I really like the idea of offering some of the OATS programs and so have that on my radar as well here. So thanks.
We've been shocked at how popular AI is as a topic. I'm engaged in a 6-session program at a college and we got 40 people signed up every session. It's unbelievable. All right. So now the other challenges, we've got volunteers, we've got programs. So how do we get places to give these talks, right? So, I'm curious how you identify host organizations. Are there particular things like our libraries or senior centers in your areas that are the best candidates? And frankly, does this change because of the geography to, the more rural or suburban or urban areas? Do they affect how you go about that? So I know because I briefly lived in North Dakota. So you've got a few large cities but a lot of smaller rural communities. How do you handle this part of the program in your state?
It's a problem. It is. We have a lot of territory to cover, and I think one of the problems we face is that in the very small communities, the senior centers, which is one of the standard places for us to give programs in towns. But in the smaller communities, the senior centers are focused on 1 meal a day and maybe a monthly health checkup, public health nurse. And they don't really have a facility or a system of social engagement that we see in the towns. And so that place that might invite us in other places just doesn't work very well in the smaller towns. So it's something we talk about, we struggle with. We also have to worry about sending volunteers out to drive 100 miles in January and may not get back. We like our volunteers to come home again. So we're cautious about that. We do offer online or virtual presentations in some cases, but most of our host organizations would like somebody in person. So it's something we are constantly working on. We have recently set up a partnership with Alzheimer's Association, in which they will do their program on the 10 signs of dementia, and we will do a program on trends and frauds, and we will put them together in somewhat abbreviated versions, and we are hoping that will get us into smaller communities, into more communities, because it's going to be a sort of a 2-for-1 setup and beneficial to the communities in many ways.
Right. Yeah, sometimes we get creative. So those partnerships, those are all kinds of things that people do. That's great. So now Washington is another state that's large, kind of a diverse geography. I'm just curious how we go about doing that. I think Jim, Kay, both of you may have something to weigh in on here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So from a staff perspective on that, focused on community engagement, the Speakers Bureau is clearly one really effective way of having our AARP State Office increase our local presence and deepen our impact across the state as a statewide organization. Looking at the Washington kind of population, the reality is more than 50% of all people in Washington state live in the greater Seattle area. When you include Spokane, that's closer to 60% of the entire state. But from an equity standpoint, especially from an equity standpoint, we want to make our presentations and our resources more accessible particularly those communities that are underserved, and that
Mhm.
includes rural communities. So at the same time, when trying to serve the entire state, we need to make sure that our Speakers Bureau team that is led and runs on the gift and power of volunteer, the gift of their time and talents and abilities, that we don't stretch ourselves so thin across the area that we burn our program out. So if our volunteer leads and staff are scrambling at the last minute to find a volunteer willing to drive 2 hours to give a presentation to a group that ends up being 3 people, 2 of which maybe came to the presentation because they didn't really have too much going on at that time. They're not really sure what the context is, but they're glad to be there. That from a sustainability standpoint, and we could make a really great impact with a few people. I don't mean to say we can't. I mean, because sometimes for those 2 or 3 people, that ends up being a really significant experience for them. But from a sustainability standpoint, that's not worth, us checking a box to say we fulfilled the request and we met all requests. So how can we shift and adapt, offering virtual presentations, for example, really trying to meet that balance of sustaining our Speakers Bureau while also adapting to ensure that we're really, again, from an equity standpoint, trying to reach all, especially those underserved communities. So I think Kay can really speak more to, as our fearless leader, how we adapt like that to meet their needs.
Yeah. No fear. So yeah, and as James said, we of course offer in person, which is everybody's preference. But as part of our intake form that organizations and hosts can fill out, they have the option of saying we prefer in person, a virtual presentation, which would be 100% virtual on a Zoom call, such as we're doing now. And when we do that, we forward electronic links and attachments of our handouts to the organizers so they can share it with their group. But we also offer hybrid presentations as well. And that is a presentation where the speaker would be virtual and be kind of shown like on TV, the large screen TV at the site. But another host or another volunteer rather, or a couple of volunteers would be present in person at the site with handouts, greeting people, chatting, answering questions, and even helping to moderate, sharing questions with the virtual speaker to then answer online. So it's really a combination. I'm in just south of Seattle. The other day, I just did an AI presentation for folks in Spokane with 2 Spokane volunteers in the room. And it actually works out very well, and it allows us to kind of access presentations and groups across all of the diverse geographic regions that we have. And some areas of Washington, I got to tell you, Barb and Doreen, they look a lot like North Dakota in their population density. So it's really a good way to reach out to those folks as well.
Yeah. We've actually, even in our little tiny state of New Jersey, we've used that hybrid model for exactly the same reasons, to get a resource where it was needed. And as I say, compared to Washington, North Dakota, Fabiana, we're a really kind of little tiny space. But I learned just a while ago in a podcast I was part of about rural access by AARP that we have rural areas in New Jersey, which I would not have forecast. So, how do we find and develop these host resources in the state?
Yeah, so a lot of our host relationships really come from digital marketing and strategic outreach. So, for example, libraries are consistently our strongest channel, our strongest hosts. They not only host the majority of our presentations, but they also generate things like referrals through newsletters, staff networks, and also word of mouth. And so, to offer an example, our email outreach to library branches across several counties brought in more than a dozen repeat or first-time bookings in 2025 alone. We also get many hosts through Google searches, AARP publications, and referrals from people who previously attended a session. And we've also gotten a bit innovative by building relationships with colleges like Rowan and Bergen County College, where the 50 plus audience is already highly engaged in their older adult learning programs.
Yeah, yeah. That's the program I'm part of. It's been pretty interesting to see how many people are signed up for all those classes. All right, so kind of the last leg of the three-leg stool here is with the volunteers, and without those, we don't have any way to deliver these presentations and sometimes keep the wheels on the bus. So I'm just curious what kind of methods people are using to successfully recruit and retain people in these bureaus, and do you have an onboarding process, or do you just like, here's the deck, have at it? I know. So let's suppose I was back in North Dakota. How would I find out about this volunteer opportunity there? And then what happens after I raise my hand to say I want to participate? I think Barb,
do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, why don't you do that, Doreen?
Okay. Well, we promote the Speakers Bureau and recruiting volunteers through a number of different methods, like social media, email, events. In fact, we're actually doing direct mail for our upcoming in-person training programs that we're doing in Bismarck and Fargo in April. So postcards are going out to a targeted group within a radius of both of those communities, because those are where most of our requests for programming comes. Mm-hmm. So we switch off between virtual and in-person training. Last year we did virtual, and that was really successful too. We got some fantastic new volunteers. And then whenever we do the training, we always open it up to existing Speakers Bureau members as well. If they want to attend, they're more than welcome to be there, because there's always some new things and people always pick up different things as well. So anyway, and then we've also done one-on-one training. Barb and I have sat down with volunteers one-on-one in our office and walk through programs and just kind of showed them the volunteer portal, things like that. And then we also tell them, hey, if you have friends that you think might like to do this, I think that is a good way, because people know people like themselves, and that's maybe a nice way to get some folks as well. I know we have one of Barb's good friends as a wonderful Speakers Bureau member now. So
very good. Anyway, have any particular wisdom from Washington about how the volunteers?
Well, anytime we do a presentation anywhere, of course, we include a slide and a pitch for volunteering for not just Speakers Bureau, but various volunteer opportunities within AARP. And, they also have the opportunity to submit their interest online. And then once they do that, they'll meet with the staff outreach directors. They'll get a volunteer onboarding, AARP overview. And then they're going to meet with usually me so far and complete a volunteer self-assessment survey. And this is kind of just an opportunity for them to say, what are their interests? What are their talents, expertise of our presentation offerings? What are they interested in? And also it gives them the opportunity to tell us, do they want to keep their email and phone number completely private? Is it okay to share with other volunteers only on a contact sheet? We can kind of get that information right up front. We also have a Speakers Bureau handbook that is being updated now to reflect all of our new automated processes, but all of the volunteers get a copy of that, and it's posted on the portal, of course. And then any volunteers that are interested in speaking or in a support role, going and attending and greeting people, passing out handouts. The speakers, they join current speakers at presentations to observe. And then also they have training. We have 2 scheduled for this month, fraud and brain health. And so there's their topic of interest. Then they're going to join a current speaker to co-present, to get a feel for actually doing it, but they have some support. So again, we're always looking for feedback from volunteers to expand our onboarding process. How can we support them more completely? And we're also talking about developing a mentorship program among current volunteers where we can match new volunteers with a current speaker in their geographic location to sit down with them, have coffee, answer questions, kind of be a sounding board to where they can ask the question without feeling like they've got to go to staff or somebody else they might not be as familiar with.
Yeah, that sounds great. I would just say that this was my responsibility was recruiting and training in New Jersey. So just a bit of a cautionary tale, be careful what you ask for. We once ran an ad in the AARP bulletin and we had about 85 people show up all of a sudden in 1 month, which swamped the boat because we only had about 25 members at the time. And we quickly had to figure out how to screen them down. And we ended up getting about 30 of those candidates in. The key to us was two things. One was we were very clear up front what the expectations were, how much time they could expect to spend getting trained, how much we expected them to perform. We've set the bar fairly low because we're retirees, we're volunteers. So only 2 or 3 events a year was enough. But we made them clear what we wanted then. What did they need to know about PowerPoint and other nonsense. The other key to us was scheduling of the individual training became a nightmare. There were so many people that we turned it all into self-paced training so they could go through the basics. What we are discovering, I think, is what you were mentioning, Kay, is the existing training team is considering now offering kind of a buddy system where when someone comes on, we'll give them, a grown-up, experienced person that they can reach out as a coach if they have any questions without having to feel like they have to go through some awkward process. But this allows them to get training on their own pace. But then when they have questions, there's a responsible person who can speak out with them. So it is a big challenge. All right, one of the last areas we want to talk about is impact and demonstrating value because, AARP is a big organization and everything we do needs to be justified a bit, even if it's just a little bit of staff time and maybe you want a budget. So I'm just curious, do we use things like C-Event, which is our kind of, big tracking system, or are there other ways to get, attendance numbers, feedback on how the programs and presenters are doing? I know Fabiana here in New Jersey, we've struggled a little bit with that because we keep getting told you guys are doing a lot of stuff, but you're not recording it correctly. What are some ideas of how we get the credit we deserve for all this interaction that's going on through the speakers bureaus?
Yeah, so we've definitely had a tough time showcasing our full impact to the AARP National Office. And that's not because the impact isn't there. It's really just because capturing engagement data across so many sessions a year is very challenging. And so to address this, our team has been part of several different pilot initiatives focused on finding the simplest, most scalable way to capture the right data. And while we continue to test and learn from those pilots, in the meantime, I've been compiling and sending monthly impact reports to upper leadership. And so this ensures that we're not waiting for the perfect system to start communicating our success. Right. And as I mentioned earlier, in New Jersey, we already track a ton of Speakers Bureau data from the total number of presentations to which counties they're in, presentation popularity, and more. And I pull all of those insights together into that report to clearly show the scale and the strength of the program. So while we can't provide the minimum PII, like attendee names or emails, the impact still comes through and the team gets the credit that they deserve when I send this to the national team.
Right. There's a real powerful tool for recognition, because there's a bit of a competition for a couple of our folks to see who can get more presentations in a year. So I'm just curious, in Washington, is there something similar, to understand, are we hitting the targets?
Sure, I can take that. So I think with reporting, for me, I think about, why are we doing the reporting? First off, what's the purpose of it? And one way is to try to do our best to understand the impact we're making and how to grow and adapt and change and improve how we do what we do to make a greater impact. So we have AARP event management tools, like you mentioned, C-Event and EEMC. So we're entering Speakers Bureau events into EEMC as non-RSVP events. So we on the basic level, we know how many presentations we're doing, and where they are, what audiences we may be trying to reach and focus on, how that aligns with our strategic goals and our state story, the Speakers Bureau. And it's a pretty limited way because it's more quantitative data. And when we look at all the different ways that we reach our communities, for me, from what we've kind of determined, I think in Washington, the Speakers Bureau is stronger in terms of showing the qualitative impact that we can make. So how are we actually reaching our communities through the, if there's, like I said earlier, if there's 10 people in a presentation, but they're really affected by this information, these resources, and the connections they make in person or virtually with our speakers, that's, we could, with a virtual event that we do with AARP communication channels, we could get a couple thousand people to log in and attend any kind of event, pretty much, if it's of interest, and that's just the number of people that participate. So comparing with the Speakers Bureau, it's just the number of people that we reach. It doesn't really align with how we really show and see the impact of the Speakers Bureau just with numbers alone. Mm-hmm. So we're working on developing better ways to tell the story. Like I know a lot of other states have tried different ways, and we have too, focusing on encouraging participants to provide feedback, how this impacted them, from the event organizers and community leaders to the participants themselves. How did this experience impact them in their lives and their communities? And I feel like that is really something to focus on and develop more, because it really shows what an incredible opportunity the Speakers Bureau represents for really reaching our communities and making an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, just to piggyback on what James has said, we really try to focus on training that's aligned with our new processes as they continue to change, sometimes not easy, but we always try to emphasize to the volunteers, how to tell the story of not just the Speakers Bureau and all the places we've been and people we've talked to, but it's the important information that we're sharing with the older adults in our communities, because like James said, attendance and numbers, they really don't tell the real impact of the interactions. So that's why we're always trying to empower our volunteers to capture and even tell stories that bring that information that they're sharing to life, that helps our audiences to relate to that information and, hey, to their own lives as well, to really make it real to the folks that are hearing that information.
Yeah, you making me flash back a little bit. Came from a training background. We used to I call it putting butts in seats, but it wasn't the impact we wanted to have. And but I can tell you the examples, like, I spoke to one group about fraud, and I gave them a tip about how to deal when your computer goes berserk, and you could be a suspect for a support fraud. And a couple months later, I was back at the same group, and one lady came up to me and said, my computer did that, and I did what you told me, and I never had to interact with them. I was like, so that's the impact we need to capture. But I guess right now the proxy is how many people did we talk to? So we'll see. Now, I think with my interactions with you in the past arena, I think CVent is one of the key tools, but not the only tool. So tell us a little bit of how you're doing things in North Dakota.
Right. Yeah. And just, I love the story part of it. And we use our monthly Speakers Bureau meetups to share those stories among presenters, like, how did it go? How did that come across for people? And just sharing their stories for the past month of presentations they've done. And that has been really helpful and very helpful to me as well, to understand how things are rolling out there in the community. So I really appreciate that. And yes, CVent is something that we use. We do registrations for a couple different libraries that we have monthly series programming with. So they register in advance, and not all of them do register. We have walk-ins too, which is just fine, more the merrier. And then we also host a monthly presentation at our office in Bismarck. So we have a Speakers Bureau member come in and do a presentation. We CVent that, take registrations. We have to limit it at 35 because that's what our office holds, our conference room. But those have been going over really nicely too. And just great programming. And it's nice to offer something else and on a regular basis. So we check everyone in at our office, and we are sending registration lists out to those folks at the libraries so that they can check people off and let us know who attended, or at least get us the numbers. But we are looking into some new things now to connect online with people at these presentations, especially for the ones that aren't on CVent. Like we're thinking about maybe a postcard that's left with them to go on and give us some feedback, just
Sure.
answer a survey that tells us about the program. And then that's that, offline to online thing that we are working toward this year to get people using the QR codes or texting us or getting more resources and tools from us in that manner.
Okay. Yeah. So we're all making that move. All right. So you've all been very generous with your time, but I have one last question in this, and that's kind of like, so if there's one thing you wish you had known before you started, what would that be? What would be your tip to somebody who's thinking about doing this? So I guess who wants to go first? Kay?
Yep. Well, my recommendation for other states is to document your processes from the very beginning, including who's doing what very specifically and when are they doing it. This would have helped us here in Washington because, well, we know that volunteers and staff come and go. Of course, and good documentation can save time and really save the need to recreate what your group is doing. And I think this especially holds true for the technology that you're using. I think Daryl would agree. Make sure you build continuous improvement into those processes and then into the documentation as well. And this is going to allow you to always build on what you have instead of feeling like you have to go back and start over with some specific pieces and then try to make it fit into the whole.
Okay, very good. Anybody else have anything they want to share? I think.
Well, I think in North Dakota, we learned early on when we began the program that we wanted to be sure that we had activity for our volunteers, that there were programs that we could send them out to, and they weren't sitting around wondering if they were ever going to get a call. And as that has evolved, we don't have that problem anymore because we have grown very nicely as a program. But we've also, that whole idea has evolved into communication with our host communities and with our volunteers. As Doreen mentioned, we have a monthly meetup, we have a newsletter. I try to stay in touch with volunteers who are going out each month to do some programming, make sure that they haven't haven't forgotten to make the note on their own calendars. Communication is really important, and we try to keep it up constantly.
Okay, very good. I'm not thinking of anything. Fabs, you think of anything from the New Jersey that we knew the rest was there at the birth, so it's hard to know what we would have done then, right?
Yeah, I don't know what I would have done then, but I know what I will do now and continue to do. My tip is really to just start small and focused. We're constantly piloting new initiatives in New Jersey, and through a learning curve, I've realized how important it is to start small and test and learn. So for example, Kurt, you mentioned how in New Jersey, we're in the process of building a buddy or mentoring program. So we're now applying this tip by starting with a cohort of 3 buddies maximum before offering the program to the full team.
Yeah. It's very easy to get overwhelmed and get lost in the weeds of that. So it's very good. All right. So listen, again, thanks so much for your time. Is there anything I forgot to ask that you feel like if you don't say it, you're going to explode? We need to share with the audience?
Well, Kurt, I'll share one thing from staff perspective that, this is more when you're asking what's one thing, if you look back, you would do differently. I feel like for staff who are partnering with their Speakers Bureau, which is volunteer-led, not to just say volunteer time is really critical to achieving what we're trying to achieve together. The volunteer time is sacred, but part of being a good staff partner, from my perspective, is to use our oversight and our power as staff to honor and protect that for volunteers. So if, for example, an event organizer requests a presentation that really doesn't align with current volunteer capacity, as staff, we want to reach that. We want to fulfill that. We want to provide that for the community. But we have to look at, I'm a big proponent of not letting the short-term goal accomplishment compromise our long-term goal and vision of the Speakers Bureau. So trying, not to just kind of retain volunteers, but more importantly, to try to sustain volunteers and sustain the volunteer community that we're trying to build together. So I would just say to all staff working with volunteers and Speakers Bureau, and I'm talking to myself too, not the, I need to practice this more myself. That's why I'm saying it, is to really, really prioritize, making sure that the volunteers you have what they need to continue to feel sustained and supported, even if it means saying no, or we're trying to shift from a type of request to something else. There's a lot of ways that we can work with these different organizations that request presentations than just to send a speaker out. So looking more holistically at that and saying, okay, we can't do that. What we can do, or yes, I'm glad you made that request. Here's what we can do, instead of trying to really task our volunteers with fulfilling what we hope to be able to do with our in fulfilling our requests. So that's the soapbox I'm going to get off now.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's a very important point. I'm glad you put that in. Anybody last chance? All right. Well, listen, again, I want to thank you all for sharing your time. We've given kind of a bonus episode here in terms of content, but sharing your experience. Hopefully, our listeners have learned how impactful these programs can be, and that with mere mortals with a bit of effort can actually launch a program in their state. And I want to thank our audience. We encourage you to subscribe to our Roost News podcast channel on YouTube and wherever you listen to audio versions of these programs. And of course, please invite your colleagues to join us too. I mean, on behalf of the Roost News podcast team, I would just want to thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.